In today's episode of the Daily Brief, I'll talk about two interesting stories. I first talk about Pernod Ricard, and finally, I talk about Reliance's record profit. Welcome to the Daily Brief show by Zerodha, where our aim is to simplify the biggest news in the financial markets in a way that's one level deeper as compared to news channels. I'm your host Akshara, and today is Monday, 28th July. Coming to the first story, do you remember those old men will be men ads that were on TV all the time? Well, those ads must have done their job very well because the whiskey brand they promoted, Seagram's Imperial Blue, is India's third largest whiskey brand by volume. Last year alone, the brand sold 22 million cases, making its owner, the French liquor giant Pernod Ricard, a lot of money. However, Pernod Ricard just sold Imperial Blue for a mammoth rupees 4,150 crore to Tilak Nagar Industries, one of India's largest alcohol distillers. This is the largest hard liquor acquisition deal India has seen in more than a decade. But why would Pernod Ricard sell such a popular brand to a competitor? Behind the sale is a story of shifts in how and what India drinks and how our largest alcohol companies are trying to anticipate this change. Curious? Let's crack open this story and feel free to pour yourself a drink as you watch this. We Indians absolutely love our whiskey, and this one drink alone forms two-thirds of our alcohol market. Think Royal Stag, McDowell's Number One, Johnny Walker, Jack Daniels, brands that dominate alcohol shops and weddings. India drinks more whiskey than any other country in the world. In fact, chugging 260 million cases of it last year. But within India's whiskey market and alcohol more broadly, two major trends are currently playing out. The biggest trend is that of premiumization. As Indians get richer, we increasingly want our whiskey to feel luxurious and therefore more valuable. The alcohol market is also changing, and India's new liquor customers, young men and increasingly women, are experimenting with newer, more aspirational drinks. International Wine and Spirits Research, or IWSR, predicts that premium and above whiskey will record double digit growth every single year, at least until 2027. On the other hand, mass market whiskies have been slumping in sales. There's no better example of that than Imperial Blue itself. Its volumes have been flat over the last few years. In fact, between 2019 and 24, it actually fell by 4%. So, in other words, value, not volume, reigns supreme. This may be because the government has not made it easy for alcohol companies to charge premiums. Low end brands face price caps which differ significantly across states. And because they sell to people with low income, governments tend to keep these prices low. So, with low margins, it's hard to market those brands. Premium brands, however, cater to richer audiences who are more willing to tolerate price increases. Secondly, premiumization has coincided with the rise of homegrown brands. Whiskey is having its own Make in India moment. India's uniquely humid climate helps age our single malts much faster than those from, say, Europe. And aging improves how good it tastes. That makes them highly sought after. In the latest year, we saw data for 2021-22. Indian single malts soared an eye-popping 144% by volume. In 2023, the Indian brand Inri became the fastest growing single malt in the world, selling a lakh units within 2 years of its launch. Although made in India, these brands command hefty premiums, costing anywhere between rupees 3,000 to rupees 10 lakh for ultra rare editions. In fact, this trend has received a big stamp of validation from global liquor giants as well. Both Pernod Ricard and Diageo, the world's top two alcohol companies, launched their own single malts just last year. These trends are key to understanding how companies like Pernod Ricard are thinking about their next moves. So, what's Pernod Ricard up to? India, for Pernod Ricard, is the next big gold mine. Their India business has eclipsed China to become their second largest market in the world. They're now doubling down, and they recently committed more than $230 million to build Asia's largest distillery in Nagpur. Pernod Ricard's MD, Jean Touboul, believes that premium local brands are its way ahead. The launch of Longitude 77 is only the start. Now, there's simply no place for mass market brands with falling growth, like Imperial Blue in this blueprint. In the short term, selling Imperial Blue could lead to a drop in Pernod Ricard's sales. After all, it was the third largest Indian whiskey brand. However, their operating margin will improve immediately upon the sale since Imperial Blue was dragging its margins down. And in the long term, these better margins will unlock resources for them to fuel into their premium brands. Longitude 77, Glenlivet, Blender's Pride, and so on. They'll sell less but earn more. Here's the thing though, India is only one part of a global puzzle. Pernod Ricard's worldwide sales fell by 4% in the first half of FY25. Their profit growth is slowing. And in the face of this decline, they're attempting a global makeover to centralize operations and remove bloat in the company. This project, titled Tomorrow 2, could save them more than $1 billion over 4 years. A big step in this project is removing all their non core brands. Imperial Blue isn't the only one on the chopping block. Last year, they also sold most of their global wine portfolio, worth 4% of revenue. And right after finalizing the Imperial Blue deal, Pernod Ricard also sold off two of their international Irish whiskey brands. The rest of their business will be streamlined from five divisions to just two, and one will be called Gold and will house their premium brands. The other, Crystal, will represent their affordable portfolio. Pernod Ricard isn't alone in these rebalancing efforts. Its rivals have similar plans as well. Diageo, for instance, plans to invest $100 million over the next 3 years in India, focusing on premium brands. They too are cleaning house, selling 32 mass market brands and almost all of their global wine slate. And just like Pernod Ricard, they're pursuing a global makeover to cut costs by $500 million. But what's in it for the other party in this transaction? Tilaknagar is India's largest and world's second largest maker of brandy, a grape based alcohol which makes up 94% of their business. And you might know its most popular brand, Mansion House, which, by the way, has its own problems. Tilaknagar is India's fifth largest alcobev company by market cap. They are, in a sense, a strong homegrown distiller. Now, whiskey wasn't a large part of their business until recently. However, of late, they've been doubling down on whiskey, launching their own brands. And by 2030, Tilaknagar aims to increase its share of revenues from whiskey to 20%. Acquiring Imperial Blue is their biggest move to date towards that goal. Buying Imperial Blue doesn't just boost their product diversity, it also expands their geographical coverage. More than 85% of Tilaknagar's business comes from South India. They're one of the biggest liquor players in Telangana. Imperial Blue, however, is one of India's strongest pan Indian brands, with a lot of strong brand value already. Much like everyone else, Tilaknagar too is looking to add more premium products to its roster. Last year, it launched Monarch Legacy Brandy, priced at Rs 6,750 for a 750 ml bottle. It also entered a royalty based arrangement to distribute the Indian craft gin, Samsara. It's also investing in cocktail mixers, primarily those best suited to brandy. So, buying Imperial Blue then could be a stepping stone towards a more premium whiskey portfolio. So where does it get that rupees 4,000 crore from? Not very long ago, Tilaknagar was sinking in debt, but it pulled off a remarkable turnaround and is now in solid financial health. From FY19 to FY24, their net revenues have more than doubled to rupees 1,394 crore. Their EBITDA margins as well have improved from 8.1% to 13.3%, and where over a quarter of their revenue would previously go into paying debt, that number has dropped to 2%. It will raise debt to finance this deal, but it now has enough firepower to sustain that debt burden. With the worst behind it, Tilaknagar is preparing itself for a massive spurt of growth, and their pivot to whiskey is key to that. The larger trends of premiumization and homegrown brands are creating a huge shuffle in the Indian alcohol industry. The sheer volume of mergers and acquisitions has increased significantly in the last year. Even globally, alcohol of all kinds dominated M&A deals in the first half of 2025. From conglomerates to private equity groups, everyone is jumping into buying alcohol brands. And given how this industry is changing, our bet is that this shuffling won't decrease anytime soon. Between all of this, bidding wars aren't uncommon, and Imperial Blue captures this frenzy very well. Pernod Ricard officially put Imperial Blue up for grabs in September 2024, and since then, Tilaknagar, Suntory, Inpru, and private equity group TPG have all tried to buy it. So, how does this shuffle change the market? Which new winner shall emerge? We don't know, but it's certainly an exciting time for alcohol companies. Now, coming to the second story. Reliance Industries' first quarter results for FY26, announced on July 18th, delivered headlines that seemed almost too good to be true. A whopping 76.5% jump in net profit to Rs 30,783 crore, which is an all time high. That is India's largest company by market cap just posted its highest ever quarterly profit. Not something you hear every day. But you're probably also wondering, how in the world is that possible? That's the sort of profit growth that a startup would be proud of. How can a lumbering giant like Reliance make such a leap? As with most financial stories, the devil lies in the details. So much of that profit came from a one time event that has nothing to do with Reliance's business. During the quarter, Reliance sold a huge stake in Asian Paints, booking a gain of Rs 8,924 crore. It booked all those gains without spending anything this quarter. That is, it looks like pure profit on its books. The company's gross revenue, with these earnings included, grew just 6% year on year to rupees 2,73,252 crore. And there, it's nearly rupees 9,000 crore gains from Asian Paints looks like a minor footnote. But as that denominator shrinks, the effect of that divestment feels magnified. The same amount pushed the company's EBITDA up by 36% year on year to rupees 58,024 crore, again a quarterly record, and it made almost one third of its quarterly profit. You won't see such gains every quarter though. That said, even once you ignore the Asian Paints side note, Reliance delivered a solid quarter. Without it, it still delivered a solid 15% EBITDA growth with 25% PAT growth. Respectable numbers that reflect genuine business momentum. So, what's Reliance doing right? Jio was a star performer last quarter. It grew its revenues by 19% year on year, while its PAT jumped 25%. With a net profit of Rs 7,110 crore, Jio was Reliance's single largest profit engine for the last quarter. It also broke past an EBITDA margin of 50%. That is, it spends less than 50 paisa for every rupee it earns in revenue. What's more, the company is still adding new users at a breakneck pace. It added 9.9 million net new customers over the quarter. By the end of the quarter, it was just short of half a billion subscribers. It also broke through another psychological barrier this quarter, amassing 200 million 5G subscribers. And that is, an entire Brazil sized population now uses Jio's fastest mobile offering. That's an enviable position to be in. And India is the world's second largest market for 5G smartphones, second only to China. And Jio has captured the pole position for itself. Volumes aren't all that's driving higher revenue though. People are also paying more for Jio services than before. Just 1 year ago, customers paid Jio an average of Rs 181.7 per month. They now pay Rs 208.8 per month, a difference of 15%. In a nutshell, Jio is massively popular and very profitable. Both are fantastic news for the company. Beyond mobiles, a big part of Reliance's telecom business has to do with getting routers into people's homes. And there it's making an interesting play, focusing on fixed wireless, what it calls Geo Air Fiber. See, setting up traditional wired broadband connections is a difficult task. You need to dig up roads, seek right of way clearances, deal with municipal inspections, and lay miles of wire, spending thousands of rupees per customer. Geo Air Fiber flips that math. It simply mounts a small radio unit on your nearest rooftop, which beams internet to your house. That's much easier to scale, and it does so using what's called UBR, or unlicensed band radio, which are unlicensed frequencies of the sort that are used for Wi Fi. In all, Geo hit 20 million home connections this quarter. They added 2.6 million home connections in the quarter, which is a run rate of almost 1 million new connections a month. Equally impressively, 7.4 million of those were fixed wireless connections, making it the world's largest fixed wireless player with an 82% market share in India. This is already an impressive rollout, and Jio seems to be doubling down on wireless internet. Not only have they partnered with SpaceX to distribute Starlink's high speed internet services in India, they're also racking up 6G patents. Here's what they've said in their con call. Now, there's another business that exemplifies Reliance's diversification away from its traditional oil and petrochemical backbone, retail. The retail arm as well saw healthy growth over the quarter. Revenues rose 11.3% year on year to rupees 84,171. Its EBITDA too grew at a healthy 12.7%. Reliance Retail has two things going for them. First, more people are shopping at Reliance stores, with registered customers up 13% from a year ago. And second, those customers are buying more often, with the quarter's transactions going up 16% year on year. Behind this broad push are two segments where the company claims market leading performance: groceries and fashion. Groceries are the bedrock of Reliance's retail engine. It has a whole range of groceries businesses, from neighborhood supermarkets like Reliance Fresh to brands like Freshpick that serve a premium crowd. This is Reliance's largest retail segment and the most stable one as well. Moreover, it's growing rapidly. The company saw double digit growth in many grocery categories over the quarter. But the most exciting part of the groceries business is quick commerce. Reliance's quick commerce business, GeoMart, is one of the fastest growing parts of the business. In a space that's already seeing intense competition from new age businesses like Zepto and Blinkit, they're trying to crack a whole new approach. Quick commerce companies usually only operate through dark stores. Reliance, though, is turning to its huge and ever expanding network of retail stores. They're only adding dark stores to fill gaps if their offline coverage falls short. This gives them a presence in far more cities than their competitors, and in each of those places, they get the benefit of both quick commerce and their traditional retail business. This advantage, it seems, is trickling into their numbers. Their daily orders jumped 175% since last year and 68% from last quarter. So here's what the company is saying. But while its grocery segment may be thriving, Reliance's fashion business is where it's seeing the highest margins. Now, this isn't just because fashion in general has better margins. Reliance controls a lot of its fashion value chain. A lot of what it sells is made in house rather than being bought from outside suppliers. This gives it particularly high margins. Early in its journey, Reliance's fashion foray was synonymous with one brand, Reliance Trends. But over the last decade, the company has built out a huge constellation of brands that it either owns or sells. Now its empire is more complex. Many of these brands are sold online through Agio. Now, Agio is doing pretty well for itself. It's winning new customers. 18% of its revenue this quarter came from new customers. Meanwhile, each customer is slowly spending more. Last quarter, its average customer spent 17% more than they did last year. More interestingly, though, Reliance is marrying this to quick commerce. It recently launched Agio Rush, a new 4-hour delivery service. Now, these successes don't mean Reliance's retail business is without challenges. Many other retail verticals didn't do nearly as well. Take consumer electronics. As early monsoons cut the summer short, Reliance's air conditioner sales for the year tanked. But the company doesn't see this as a problem. Management noted that the first quarter of any year is traditionally a low point. If they are to be believed, things will accelerate over the next couple of quarters. Of course, we can't write about Reliance and ignore its backbone, energy. Now, that's a less pretty picture. Reliance's oil and gas exploration and production, or E&P business, is facing hard realities. Its fields are growing older and less abundant. Its revenue from this vertical fell 1.2% from the previous year, while EBITDA fell more sharply by 4.1%. A big culprit for this fall is its share of the KG-D6 gas field, Reliance's flagship offshore asset. Last quarter, Reliance pumped out 8% less gas from the field than it did a year ago. Now, this is natural. Oil and gas fields don't remain abundant forever. As you pump gas out, they slowly run out, and whatever is left becomes hard to extract. But that doesn't mean Reliance's E&P business is running in losses. It remains highly profitable with 81.9% EBITDA margins. But those margins are falling. Reliance is trying to arrest this decline by drilling 40 new wells, but there's only so much it'll get out of them. Reliance's oldest business, though, isn't extraction but refining, which is turning crude oil into fuels and petrochemicals. This business remains stable. Unlike the E&P business, as long as its refineries can source crude oil globally, they'll stay alive. Last quarter, the company shut down many units of its Jamnagar refinery for 3 weeks for maintenance, and that pulled its refining revenues down 1.5% year on year to rupees 1,54,804 crore. The pain of that decline, however, was offset by better profitability. With crude oil prices falling fast last quarter, the company saw better margins, and its refining EBITDA grew by 10.8% to rupees 14,511. But the days of these legacy business lines are numbered. As the world moves to greener sources of energy, any oil based business will see declining fortunes. And that's perhaps why the company is investing heavily in what it calls its new energy ecosystem. It's constructing what it calls the world's largest integrated renewable energy manufacturing facility. Spread across 44 million square feet, this complex will house 10 separate manufacturing units covering the entire solar value chain, from polysilicon to modules, as well as battery manufacturing and green hydrogen. Someday, this might come to replace the Jamnagar refinery as the soul of Reliance's business. And here's what the management is saying. So, Reliance may well be India's largest company, but it's a company that's going through a metamorphosis. Its record profits this quarter were a one off windfall, but if you're trying to understand the company, that's not what you should focus on. The real story is one of how it's moving from an energy and petrochemicals giant to a diversified technology and consumer powerhouse. While most of its revenues may come from legacy oil and gas businesses, that isn't where its future lies. To keep growing, it'll have to pull off a complex, decade long pivot, the largest India has ever seen. The pivot is well underway because 5 years ago, around 70% of the company's revenues came from its oil to chemicals business. This quarter, it was down to 57%. It'll probably decline further. Wireless internet, quick commerce, fast fashion, green energy, all these experiments are bound by a single thread, the need to bring Reliance to a new era. Before we get to the tidbits, we have an update on the Geo Allianz story. So on Friday, we explored India's reinsurance sector after Geo and Allianz announced their joint venture. It was our first time diving into this industry, and we were wondering why GIC RE, India's public sector reinsurance giant, was losing market share to foreign players. Turns out we missed a very important piece of context. One of our YouTube subscribers, S. Bhaskaran7638, made an insightful comment about an important drag on GIC RE's business: crop insurance. Government companies aren't always pure profit making entities. They often carry social responsibilities. So, crop insurance under government schemes like the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana is a prime example. These schemes insure crops at subsidized rates, and much of this risk ends up being reinsured by GIC. Private players typically avoid it because it's not profitable, leaving GIC to absorb these risks, which is a responsibility GIC itself has repeatedly flagged as a burden. Honestly, this angle completely slipped past us during our research. But this comment helped us better understand the industry's nuances. So, thanks again, S. Bhaskaran7638. We are genuinely thankful for our viewers who engage actively and contribute insights that improve our work, keep us honest, and ultimately benefit our entire audience. We are just trying to understand the world. We aren't experts. And whenever we miss something, we hope that you'll fill us in. Which is why we hope you keep writing in with comments like these, and we look forward to many more interactions. Now, coming to the tidbits, Adani Group has partnered with MedTube, a leading copper tubes manufacturer, to expand its footprint in the copper industry. This collaboration will enable the two firms to tap into the growing demand for copper tubes in industries like air conditioning, refrigeration, and construction. Coming to the next tidbit, electric vehicles are getting popular all around the world. VinFast India has secured advanced electric vehicle orders from Nepal, Sri Lanka, West Asia, and Africa even before inaugurating its $2 billion Thoothukudi plant in Tamil Nadu. The facility is expected to commence operations by end of July 2025, with vehicle deliveries slated for the upcoming festive season. Coming to the next tidbit, India and UK finally signed the deal. After 14 rounds and 3 British PMs, India and the UK have sealed their biggest trade agreement yet, the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, or CETA. The deal gives 99% of Indian exports duty free access to the UK and slashes Indian tariffs on 90% of UK goods. Now, coming to the final tidbit. Just months after lifting curbs on ethanol production from sugarcane and paddy, India is now gearing up to introduce E27, petrol blended with 27% ethanol, by the end of August. Having already achieved the E20 target ahead of its schedule, this move takes India closer to Brazil-style ethanol blending, with Union Minister Nitin Gadkari confirming that standards for E27 fuel are being finalized. That's all the news I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.
Disclaimer: this content is for informational purposes only. None of the stocks, brands, or products mentioned are recommendations or endorsements.